Welcome to another OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners post-game podcast, the last post-game podcast that we're going to have for the 2023 season as Oklahoma loses to Arizona in the Valero Alamo Bowl 38-24 in what seemed like one of the most roller coaster bowl games I've witnessed in a while. I'm sure you guys have similar takes. This thing, we're going to have a lot of hot takes, folks. I think that is where we were just discussing it off air. There's going to be a lot of hot takes. Some people listening are not going to like our takes. Some people are. I learned that in the instant analysis where there was like 75% liked our takes that Blake and I put up. And there was a couple of people like, you are over exaggerating and blah, 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 blah. And it's worse than blah, blah, blah. And you don't know. Everybody looks at you with a blank stare. And I'm like, dude, the comments say different, but okay, cool. You know what? Good for you, buddy. But thanks for watching. It's just one of those days where everybody's mad because there was so much expectation going into the bowl game, despite the fact Oklahoma was missing so many people. Right. Like, I think that was totally glossed over. Dylan Gabriel's not there. You know, Andrew Rame, Caden Green, like you could on the offensive side, I think is where it was most notably, you know, the absences were very glaring. And I think we need to discuss all that. Plus, we also need to dive in our thoughts on the future of 2024. Kind of an early, kind of like they do. ESPN does the top 25, the way too early synopsis of the next season. We need to do the same here for Oklahoma because
we've got a ton to hit.
Yeah.
And we're going to hit it all. We're not necessarily putting a timer on this podcast. However long we talk, well, that's how long we're going to talk. We got the full round table. You already heard from Brandon Drum. I am Parker Thune. Momentarily, you will hear from Jesse Crittenden, as well as Brian Clinton. The whole OU Insider crew, well, not the whole crew. Blake Mullen, you heard from on the Instant Reaction podcast last night. And, of course, those of you that are familiar with our basketball coverage know the great work that Brody Lusk does covering all things OU hoops and recruiting. But as far as your four credentialed members of the football beat for OU Insider, we are all here. And we're all ready to break down everything that happened in the Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, as well as the 2023 season as a whole. We'll go big picture as we begin to look ahead to what year one in the SEC could and will bring for Oklahoma. But first, a word from our sponsor. This version of the OU Insider Under the Visor podcast is brought to you by Manscaped, who's helping you step into 2024 with confidence. Manscaped is where resolutions are met and hairs are neatly kept. So as the new year approaches, why not make self-improvement a breeze by keeping your body well-groomed? The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is here. And let me tell you, it's got futuristic tendencies. Included in this bundle is the brand new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the Weed Whacker 2.0 ear and nose hair trimmer, and the essential aftercare products like the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave Lotion and Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant, as well as two free gifts, the Boxers 2.0 and the Shed 2.0 toiletry bag. So you can start the new year right, because when you look good, you feel good. Manscaped is helping you sculpt the best version of yourself for the year ahead. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code OU Insider at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com when you use code OU Insider. Happy New Year to your balls, gentlemen.
Excellent. Thank you. Happy New Year's all the way around. Go ahead, Jesse.
I just know that's, honestly, when you put it that way, when you hear that, it feels like the proper way to end the year. It just does. It's a nice message. It's a good message.
It is.
That's all I wanted to say.
Anything to keep away from chafing. Speaking of chafing, no, just kidding. I don't know where that.
This could get off the
road. Or choking. Or never mind. I'm not going to go there. That was too soon for the OU fans. A little bit there. Yeah, that game, folks. I want Jesse. We were talking. I want you to go first because you watched it. I watched it on television I'm in Colorado. I'm in Crested Butte right now. I'm in a beautiful office, whatever the home that we're in. I love it. Whatever we got off Airbnb. But uh, you said you watched it obviously in person at the stadium. Then last night about 4 a.m. you decided it was on television. You were in the media room, the hospitality room in the hotel room, and you decided I'm going to stick around and watch it. And you said I came away with some different thoughts than I had initially inside, and I said better or worse before we got on because I want to keep it general. You said the good was good, better than I thought, and the bad was worse, which is exactly what I've thought the whole time. But the thing is, I thought everything's fixable. I think that was the one thing I came away with. They're fixable. Everything that the mistakes are very fixable mistakes, costly but fixable. What was your take?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought the same thing. And there was so much. There's so much to dissect from that game. There's so many different things to look at on both sides of the ball, even special teams. I think the thing for me, I think to specify one thing, I was more impressed with Jackson Arnold upon watching the game on TV. Some of those throws, I mean, that throw to Jalil Farouk on the first Farouk fumble in the second quarter, that was a dart. That was just a really, really good throw. Obviously there were a lot of, I mean, there were some throws he'd like to have back too. I was really impressed with OU in the second and third quarters when their defense settled in. Arizona's offense didn't get anything going in the second and third quarters. I really liked what OU's defense did in that 3-3-5. That pass rush kept on getting pressure in the backfield. I thought the offense was really good. I thought the play calling was good. I thought Jackson Arnold was good. But I think the main thing for me is, I think the good was really good. The bad was really bad. And there was one play, and I saw it live when it happened on that Arizona scoring drive in the fourth quarter on the 57-yarder. That drive was huge, and that was the play. Brent Venables singled it out. That was a drive. They got a 2nd and 17. They got like 15 yards on a 2nd and 17. That just can't happen. And then on the next play to get the first down, OU's defense was completely out of whack, completely out of sync. At one point, Danny Stutzman threw Kendall Dolby at McMillan to try to get him over there because the defense was just out of line. And it didn't matter. They found McMillan for like 15 yards. I don't want to be long-winded, but I think there's so many things. Look, it was a taped together offensive line, true freshman's first start. First game for Seth Luttrell. A lot of guys have entered the portal on both sides of the ball. It's a lot of change. Mm-hmm. I think the thing for me is there's a lot of things to be excited about, but it was just disappointing to see OU again shoot themselves in the foot. And that's what they did in all three losses. Just things that can't happen. Mistakes that can't happen happened again. And so it's like with all of that stuff, I kind of said the same thing to Brian, but with like all of that necessary context, some of it's good. But it was disappointing. It was a disappointing way to lose that game. OU should have won that game. They just should have. They should have won that game and finished with 11 wins. And mistakes on both sides of the ball really, really cost them.
And I'll bring this up. I mentioned it on the radio today, but here's an interesting perspective. And my first thought after the conclusion of that game, watching Oklahoma lose yet another contest that was so winnable, was okay. Through 2 years of the Brent Venables regime, there has never been a time, save for the Red River Showdown in 2022 for obvious reasons, that the Sooners lost because they were overmatched or outgunned, simply less talented than the opposition. And yet 10 losses in 2 years, the vast majority of them coming in games that Oklahoma had a very real, very legitimate chance to go and seize victory, and either failed to do so or willfully let it slip away. And it felt like the same song umpteenth verse for this team. It felt like so many of the same things that we've seen bite them time and again, especially once that fourth quarter rolled around. You felt like Arizona seized some momentum. The Sooners just needed to find a way to stop it. Continually, they could not. In fact, they compounded upon the issues by continuing to commit turnovers, and you're not going to win a football game when you are -5 in the turnover margin. But I thought this was a very interesting perspective from my dad, who OU alum, big fan, texted me this morning after gathering his thoughts on the game. And this was a take I hadn't heard yet. I found it quite intriguing. He said, "It's good to watch us lose a game because we failed to perform on the field rather than losing a game because our OC took his foot off the gas." So, I mean, look, execution is what killed Oklahoma
Who said
on
that?
Thursday. That was my dad.
Oh, I was like, oh man, that's a quote.
Yeah, no, that's from a fan, no one who's got any vested interest in what happens other than they want to see their alma mater win championships. But I think it's very simple, and I don't want to make it harder than it is, because so many people hit the message boards and such and blast their opinions out there. And when Oklahoma loses a game, it seems like there are folks that want to cast the blame all around. Anything that could be blamed will be blamed, right? They want to hold the offensive line accountable. They want to hold the defensive secondary accountable. They want to hold Seth Luttrell accountable. Look, end of the day, execution is what killed Oklahoma on Thursday evening in San Antonio. They committed 6 turnovers. It is as simple as that. No matter how good you play outside of those 6 turnovers, if you commit 6 turnovers, you will lose a football game, because football is a game that has a way of punishing you for those errors, whether that is in an immediate sense or later on down the line. Rent will come due, and it did for Oklahoma last night.
Yeah, no, I'll piggyback off of that. First thought is, what a game to sit back and watch and realize just how important turnovers are, but from a perspective of it's the ultimate equalizer. There's no way that you could have gone into this game predicting that Oklahoma would have 6 turnovers. It's what we watched transpire, and it's one of those games where it just felt like Arizona had more balls fall their way the way that they needed to. It was, there's not very many times when you see a fumble forced and the ball goes straight up in the air and lands in a safety's hands, and then he's got a convoy all the way back, 87 yards for a score. Um, just a weird game, but I think on the way home today, there's lots of time to think, and I think the biggest thing, and Jesse and I kind of talked on this briefly, youth with this team, I think has really shown in their losses, and not just on the field. I think you can see kind of the youth with the coaching staff as well. This is, Brent Venables is 51, 52 years old. This is only his second year as a head coach. You've got a lot of young guys, a lot of young coaches that are stepping into bigger roles than we've seen them have in other years or other times, and there's a lot of learning going on the fly. You had a loss to Mike Gundy, who has been around the block 7 or 8 times. You had a loss to Lance Leipold, who many people, regardless of the fact of how long he's been the coach at Kansas, plenty of success before that as a head coach elsewhere. And of course, Jed Fish has been around in the NFL and been around football a long time as well. So 3 coaches that really know what they're doing on the opposite sideline. And I think that we're just seeing guys have to learn on the fly. The youth on the field, I think, is both a blessing and a curse for Oklahoma, because a lot of it's coming back and it's extremely talented. But you saw in this game, as awesome as I think Jackson Arnold's future is with Oklahoma, he just had some simple things that he knows he wishes he could have back, and they're simple things that, going back and watching it on film, he's going to recognize immediately. I shouldn't have done that. or, if I didn't put the ball here instead of here, things would have been differently. So, long story short, the game was just odd. I mean, they held Arizona to 29 yards rushing, 1.1 yards per rush. Oklahoma had over 200 yards on the ground. Gavin Sawchuk had 8.9 yards per carry, I believe. It was all things indicating Oklahoma would win the game until you look at that turnover stat. So it's just one of those games that I think it's hard to really encapsulate what truly happened. But at the end of the day, I just think it wasn't Oklahoma's night; it was Arizona's night, and it was just kind of a perfect synopsis to how Oklahoma has lost games over the last couple of years.
No, look. I think one of the weirder stats I've ever seen in my life is that I believe 75% of Arizona's offense was off 4 plays.
In
Like
the
that,
second,
yeah.
in the second and third quarters, Arizona had 99 yards. OU had 400. OU had 460 in those 2 quarters.
And they ended up with like 270 something, right? Like to end the ball game. Like
OU outgained them 562 to 383.
383. There you go. But there was like 4 or 5 plays that 75% of the yards came off of it. And that just boggles my mind. Like that shows you how good the defense plays. And I want to point out something. I talked to some people around Norman today, and I was asking, okay, why was the bend route between the cover 2? What they were doing is they're running posts, but they were bending right in front of them and cutting routes off. Why would that keep getting allowed? And I said, was it a safety issue? And multiple people said no. So this whole narrative from everybody outside of that locker room is going, the safeties cost the game, the safeties and the DBs, this is this. Danny Stutzman did his job. He got depth like he was supposed to on almost every play. As good as Kip Lewis played, as far as in the run game and as far as, blitzing and among other things, he did not play well in the passing game. Nobody did outside of Danny Stutzman. And that was told to me by multiple people that know what they were doing, know the calls, know all that type of stuff that are around the program, all that. That tells you that it wasn't just one person. It wasn't just one group that allowed those big plays in the passing game. It was the secondary, the safeties could have played up a little more or played a little bit more shallow when it come to that, and forced Fafita to have to throw it longer or have to take, because he thought they were going to bend it, but Oklahoma came up and played shallow. Therefore, it was maybe a half second longer waiting, which would allow the pass rush to get to him. Or the linebackers could have got more depth. I was told there was multiple things there, but for the most part, the safeties did what they were supposed to do outside of a few big plays that the Peyton Bowen play where he just lost the ball in that double coverage and he could have came up, and McMillan just came up and kind of undercut him to catch it.
Tedderell McMillan is a superstar in the making.
Yeah, he's awesome.
And I don't want that to get lost in all the discourse from this football game either. Yes, Oklahoma had opportunities to win. Yes, they failed to capitalize. Yes, they left a ton of meat on the bone, but also Arizona made the plays when they needed to make the plays. Noah Fafita was superb, and McMillan was an absolute mismatch all night and not somebody Oklahoma had an answer for. And to be honest, probably a guy that very few teams in the nation have a legitimate answer for.
You know that Fafita has been trained quite a bit by Derek Rasmussen from Sooner 7.
I did know that. Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. Like, an Oklahoman is the one that trained him. He's one of the better quarterback trainers in the nation. And so he goes down to Arizona. He trained him. around there in California and all that type of stuff. So that's a really cool connection between the two states. I know you fans don't care to hear that, but it's a really cool deal. I think in the long run for me, I thought as far as Jackson Arnold went, I keep harping back to this his high school deal where he went through something eerily similar, where he played well and threw some touchdown passes, but he threw some big picks that hurt Denton Geyer back when he was a freshman because he got thrust into the 6A1 state title game because Eli Stowers hurt his shoulder, who eventually went on. Eli Stowers eventually went on to play for Texas A&M. And the story goes that his dad, Todd Arnold, gets him in the car. He doesn't ride home on the bus, gets him in the car, and they turns and looks at him. He goes, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yes." He goes, "Then you're not going to let this game define you." And I think you saw a more mature version of Jackson there last night at the podium post game where he said, "No, like it's not going to define us, but that's on me. Like the mistakes were on me. I made bad reads. I'm going to fix those." And lo and behold, Danny Stutzman kind of throws himself out there and says, "Look, we're all behind him. He's our guy. That is our guy moving forward. We're 100% behind him. We know what he can do." And if I'm an OU fan and I see a true freshman in his first start against a top 15 team, against one of the better defenses in college football in the last 7-8 weeks of the season, at least, and he goes out there and throws for 361, yeah, the 2 interceptions, but he throws for 361 and 2 touchdowns, and dang near should have had 2 more if it wasn't for fumbles, right? Like potentially 2 more touchdown passes, right? You got to be pretty pleased with it. Yeah, there were some mistakes that you look and you bang your head on the wall and you're like, "Oh my God, how do you make that mistake?" But he's a freshman in his first start. He has never seen a lot of what was going on last night. And yet he got down 13-0 or 10-0 or whatever it was and brought them back. Not a lot of dudes in his situation, particularly true freshmen, first start, have the moxie to do that. And I think there's a lot that you can build off of. Yeah, some of the bad was really bad, as Jesse alluded to. But the good, oh my God. Like, you see the groundwork there. But I don't think any of that's going to really matter of what he is if they can't shore up the offensive line. Because they're going in next year with Fabici, Nawawu at one of the guards. Obviously, you got Troy Everett, who just played awful after he hurt his knee. But again, he gritted it out. He tried to play. But he was a liability a little bit at the end of the game, unfortunately for him. And then you got Jacob Sexton and Spencer Brown. Those are your 4. If they can shore up one of those other guards positions, I think they're going to be all right. I do. I think they're going to be all right. But they've got to go do that in the transfer portal. And Beadenbo's got to get them all fixed up. But outside of that, you have what we talked about, guys. Dang near 11 starters coming back on defense. If you look at, snaps played and how they rotate them and stuff, like Dejon Terry is essentially a starter. Ethan Downs, R. Mason Thomas, essentially starters. You're losing Coe and Bothroyd on the defense. That's about it. But the other guys that play with them played so many snaps, they're essentially starters. It's the offense that you sit back and worry about. The defense is where you're like, okay, well, there may be some problems next year. But do you all worry about the quarterback position next year? Because I don't. No. I really think he's going to be special.
I'm not discouraged at all by yesterday, and that's, watching it on TV only reinforced that to me. And I think the thing for me going in was I wanted to see, because Seth Luttrell made a point to say before the game that they weren't going to change much about the offense, that a lot of it was going to be pretty similar to what OU had been running all year. But I was kind of curious, even if it's a lot of it was maybe similar or similar concepts, similar ideas, I wanted to see what the run pass split was going to be like. And I wanted to see how much Luttrell put on Arnold's shoulders. And it was immediate. 5 of their first 6 plays were passes. He throws a pick on the first and third possessions, And then on the fourth possession, the first touchdown drive, he went 5 for 6 for 50 yards. So even despite the mistakes, he kept on coming back to Jackson Arnold. I think it made it pretty clear to me that Jackson Arnold's going to be airing it out a lot next year. That's one. Two, I thought it was really impressive how Jackson Arnold settled in. I mean, man, you put a true freshman in a neutral environment against a top 15 team. He throws picks on 2 of the first 3 possessions. A lot of quarterbacks
crumble.
Melt in that and it wasn't just not melting down then, but that second quarter was impressive. You want one play to point to in terms of the potential of this offense. That I mentioned this on the rapid reaction last night, but that throw to Nick Anderson, that scramble out left, the Nick Anderson catch, it was one of the highlight plays of the season. You could argue it was the best play of the season, besides maybe the Texas Nick Anderson touchdown. I said before the game I was going to be pretty curious to see how involved Nick Anderson was going to be. It's pretty clear Arnold and Anderson have a connection. I think that's going to be a solid part of this offense next season. But no, yeah, I mean, some of the turnovers were bad, some of the throws were bad. But considering, it was a makeshift offensive line first game for Luttrell. I was encouraged a lot by Arnold. He wasn't afraid to throw downfield. He made plays with his legs. I was really impressed by a couple of his runs. Never really seemed to get, even when there were a couple of really tough holding penalties in the fourth quarter that really killed some drives. But I don't know. I think it's about what you would expect from a guy that has a lot of potential, from a true freshman that has a lot of potential. There were really good there were high highs and there were some low lows, but now he gets an entire spring and off season, not only to prepare to be QB1, but he gets to do it with Luttrell. I'm not discouraged at all. That's one of the takes I've seen since last night. I haven't seen it a ton. I completely disagree with it. I think you can say, there were some bad moments, but I don't know why anyone would be discouraged, I guess.
Yeah. So you brought up the run pass run disparity. And I think that's something that gets kind of glossed over is the Gavin Sawchuk when he tweaked his hammy. They went to him twice, and on both of those runs, he was like looking after like 15 yards. He's looking like, you probably saw it on television. When they show the replay, he's like looking like, somebody come tackle me. This freaking hurts to run. And like, he did not have the explosion. He didn't have anything, but he was still, he's a bad dude, man. Like, he is so good that on one leg, he is still rushing for another 40 yards. Like, that's impressive, guys. Like, when you get down and you look at it, you're like, on one leg, that dude ran for another 40 yards in the third and fourth quarter. And they tried to go to Tolly Walker, right? Like, they tried to go to Mr. Wisconsin. And like, he just was slow last night. For some odd reason, it looked like he had bricks on his, like cinder blocks on his feet, and they were running stretch plays to him. He's not a guy that's going to go hit, the 8-9 hole and try to stretch it out and find a groove. He's a straight ahead, let's go do it, let's bang and bruise, come try to hit me because I'm a load type of runner. And I think their game plan was to be patient, like, because they saw what they were doing with that 3-man, 4-man front, the mix up that Arizona does. And I think the running backs were told, be patient. That's not Tolly Walker's strength. Walker's strength is just boom, go and get it. And the strength for Sawchuk is patient, bam, 88 and out the gate. And that's where he's special at, because he's such a patient runner. The first few drives, there were even tweets out there like, if Gavin Sawchuk's RB1 next year, we're screwed as OU. And I was sitting there going, he's ran for like 600 yards the last 4 weeks. What the hell are you talking about? It's just some of the takes that you see on Twitter, obviously, which is just a cesspool half the time. They're just bad, Parker. Just bad. Just awful takes.
Losing brings the trolls out of the woodwork.
Oh, do they?
What you inevitably end up with is a lot of unserious takes from a lot of unserious people that do not chime in when the program is winning. So you just kind of have to approach it with that understanding, filter out the detritus, and not engage with people who are very obviously simply in it to get a rise out of their peers and to I, I don't even know, like, it's not really fishing for attention because it's behind some sort of anonymous internet avatar. I don't get why people act the way that they do on the internet, but that's 2023 for you. I guess it's about to be 2024. But regardless, I guess my question to you guys would be this: as we sit here late in the evening of December 29th, recording the final Under the Visor podcast of calendar year 2023, how will you remember the 2023 season for Oklahoma? The final year of Oklahoma's tenure in the Big 12, the launching pad for the move to the SEC, year 2 of the Venables era. As you look back on everything that this season was and will be in OU lore, what stands out to you and what will you remember?
Brian, you go.
So I think the first thing that comes to mind obviously is the missed opportunities. And that's just probably the old coach in me. But I think your heart, if you're an Oklahoma fan, says, this one hurts. I've been hurt again. I saw some tweets today. Oh, thank goodness. I won't be hurt by Oklahoma football again until September. Like, I have 8 months to get the hope back up. But I think the heart tells you that. But if you take a step back and think with your head for a second, this team was 6-7 a year ago. They just finished 10-3. A lot of I think what really to sum this up, there's really no question, for me at least, going into next year, what the identity of this football team is. I think we all understand and we all know that the defense should be the strength of the team, as everyone probably expected the moment that Brent Venables became the head coach here at Oklahoma. Now, that took a couple of seasons. And I would even say that there were times offensively this year, we've had this discussion in the past, we really didn't know what the offensive identity was, because there were times when the running game wasn't working. There were times when, you had some questionable things going on in the passing game. You had different guys outside of Drake Stoops. I mean, there were some inconsistencies from week to week. But I think going into next year, I think you at least know for a fact that the identity of the team is going to be built around the defense. And even though they had some down games to finish the regular season, I think as a whole, if you go back to 2021 and see how stark of a difference there is on the defensive side of the ball, just as far as what they're able to do on a down to down basis, it's a huge improvement. And so you did miss some big opportunities as the team, and sure, there's things to be frustrated about, but at the end of the day, I think you've taken some steps forward. Unfortunately, now you have to take another huge step because the competition rises big time come next year. But I would say missed opportunities is the first thing that comes to mind, but growth would be the second.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I agree. I would say that, I mean, look, going from 6-7 to 10-3 is a success. And I think if you told people before the season that this team would finish the regular season 10-2, I think a lot of people would take that. And they grew in areas where they needed to grow. There is no doubt that this defense is significantly better than it was a year ago. It wasn't perfect. There were some tough moments, but I even think that game last night, the second and third quarter, showed again the flashes that you want to see. It was pretty clear after last year, it's going to take some time for this thing to be really, really elite, to be at the top. And I mean, but you saw the areas of growth where there needed to be growth, especially defensively. But I think for me, my main takeaway is this is still a work in progress in every facet. This is not a quick turnaround. It's not, all the problems are not going to go away next year. I think you want to continue to see this team grow every year, but it's still not where Venables wants it is trying to build it. And I think the 3 losses and the way they happened are disappointing. I think like both things can be true. That it was a successful season in a lot of ways. You saw the areas of growth, but it was also disappointing because every single one of those games they lost, they won. Or every what did I just say? I just said something that did
I
not
have
make
no
any
idea.
sense at all. Every one of
Moral
their
victories.
every one of their games that they lost, they could have won. Makes a lot more sense than what I.
There we go.
Okay, there we go. I think that is disappointing, and that's okay to be disappointed by that because even though it's a work in progress, those were games they could have and probably should have won. So I think for me, the question is, or it's 2 questions going into this or going into next year, based on my takeaway of 2023. Can the team continue to improve like they did from year 1 to year 2? Year 2 was about improvement, and they did improve. 10-3 is a good season. There's been a lot that's happened since Brent Venables took over. Think about it. OU's already got a new offensive coordinator. Think about all the players that have hit the portal. Think about all the instability. That should be better next year. But considering all of that, you got to be happy with some of the areas of growth. But 2 questions. 1, can this team continue to grow? Because that's the thing. It needs to keep growing every year. Can they do that again next year, especially with the move to the SEC? And 2, my question is, even with the improvement from year 1 to year 2, can this team find a way to not shoot themselves in the foot in games that are there for the taking? I think that's the main thing for me, is even though they did a better job of winning this year, they still penalties and turnovers still killed them in those 3 games. Can Brent Venables and the staff, it's a top-down thing. Can they top to bottom figure out a way to close games? That is still the bugaboo from year 1 to year 2. Can they work on that in year 3? But ultimately, I think it's both. It's weird. It's both successful and disappointing. I think those are the 2 words: successful and disappointing.
And
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think you're spot on, Jesse. And that's almost exactly how I feel. I probably would have said something very, very similar because I find myself saying the words "both can be true" a lot about Oklahoma football.
Yeah.
Just because, and like evergreen observation here, right? But it's never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is. So you know what? Maybe at the end of it all, 10-3 is exactly what it looks like. 10-3. Good but not great. And that's what this season was for Oklahoma. Here's what is important to me, though, as I think back on the trajectory of this season and what Oklahoma will have at their disposal heading into 2024. I think the biggest wins of the year you can rank in this order. 1, Texas. 2, Danny Stutzman. 3, Billy Bowman.
Yes.
I mean, the fact that you got those 2 guys back for your maiden voyage into the SEC is enormous. The significance cannot be overstated because now you have a nucleus, and you would have had pieces absent those guys, but you return a nucleus. You return a heart on the defensive side of the ball. And offensively, there will be a bit of a changing of the guard in the trenches, no doubt about it. But as I project ahead at what 2024 is going to look like for Oklahoma football, if Bill Bedenbaugh can get his ducks in a row on the offensive line, and I have no question, or I have no doubt, I don't think there is a question that he will do so. Think about what you have across the board. Jackson Arnold as your starting quarterback, Gavin Sawchuk, who played as well as any running back in America over the final 5 games of the season, leading the charge in the backfield. Tight end, you're going to have a bit of a revolving door probably, but you've got a very highly regarded true freshman in Devon Mitchell that could be an elite option from day one. Wide receiver is freaking loaded, man. Like more loaded than people realize, because not only do you have Jalil Farouk, I know nobody wants to hear his name right now. He's still a good football player and one of Oklahoma's best options at the position. Not only do you have Farouk coming back, Nick Anderson coming back, Jaden Gibson coming back, you have Gavin Freeman coming back. obviously. Brennan Thompson returns. You bring Deion Burks into the fold. And here's who everybody's forgetting about. Andrell Anthony. You get a healthy Andrell Anthony in that receiver room as well. Andrell Anthony, without question, was Oklahoma's best, most productive, and most impactful wide receiver through the first half of the season until he got injured in the Cotton Bowl. Emmett Jones's room is stacked. I think I rattled off 6-7 names right there. That doesn't even begin to take into consideration guys like Jaquez Petaway, the outstanding freshman class coming in, headlined by Zion Kearney, who is every bit as talented as any wide receiver in the nation in the 2024 class. And that's a take I'll stand by. Emmett, the array of options that the Sooners are going to have as to who they can roll out there at wide receiver is going to make things so difficult on SEC defenses, assuming Jackson Arnold can make the leaps cognitively to be able to minimize those mistakes that we saw in the Alamo Bowl and keep things humming through the air. Then you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, and Brandon, you mentioned it, 9 of 11 starters coming back. The 2 that are leaving, well, okay, that's pending Woody Washington's decision. If Woody Washington returns, you have 9 of 11 starters coming back, and the 2 that depart aren't the toughest guys in the world to replace. You have comparable players already at that level on your roster right now. So I think the Sooners have the opportunity to be a very good defensive team in 2024. And I know it's a different ballgame in the SEC. I still feel as though, especially because so many of those guys will be going into year 3 in Brent Venables' defensive scheme, that's where the magic has happened historically with Venables' defenses at Clemson. Those guys head into year 3 with the same philosophy that they're espousing on the defensive side of the ball and learning and continually growing more familiar with and kind of fine-tuning their own individual roles. The Sooners have the opportunity to be drastically improved on defense in 2024. And I think offensively, they'll go as Jackson Arnold goes. I think it's as simple as that. The run game's going to be strong. I trust that. Sawchuk looks like a superstar. As long as Jackson Arnold is anywhere close to all that he's been cracked up to be, then Oklahoma can be a dangerous team in that conference in 2024. And I know it might seem like sunshine pumping after they just got knocked off in the Alamo Bowl by an Arizona team that started the season 3-3. But I'll said it before, I'll say it again. Keep in mind that Arizona team has some firepower. That's not the same team that scuffled to a 3-3 start to open the year. There's a reason they won 7 games in a row to close out the campaign. So give them their flowers and also understand it's not revisionist history when I say this either. I've been saying the exact same thing for a month. This game, to me, was never going to drastically affect my perception one way or the other as to what Oklahoma was and what they could be as a football team heading into the SEC next season.
Yeah, all 3 of y'all made a lot of really good points. I think for me, I look at this year as marked improvement along with missed opportunities is how I would probably kind of sum it up in one sentence. And they were 6-7 in 2022, guys. Like this, it's almost as if after they beat Texas, fans were like, 2022 never happened. Like that 6-7 season never happened. Oh, it happened. And that's why everybody was not believing in Oklahoma until they beat Texas. Nationally, OU, even with their brand, as big as it is, everybody was in that wait and see mantra with them all the way up to Texas. I mean, they proved at Texas they could be that team. The issue is that the Texas game was followed by a bye week that was put in a great spot as far as injuries go, but as far as like killing the momentum, it killed everything they had going for them because it allowed them to sit and look. And this goes back to the youth that we've all talked about on this podcast, how young that team was. And the mistakes were laden because of a lot of youth, right? And that's the last 2 seasons. And I think you can look at in Brent Venables' tenure and his 10 losses in the last 2 seasons, which sounds super weird to say, by the way. In the 10 losses in the last 2 seasons, did you know that 7 of them were 1 possession games, or 6 of them at least 60% of them, or something to that extent? Like, and they just blew, or they blew 7 leads. Excuse me. Let me refresh this. They blew 7 of them. They blew 7 leads. How about that? That's a better way to look at it. They blew 7 leads of the 10 losses. And so you look at that and you go back and you go, well, there seems to be a trend here. Well, the trend is youth. There's a lot of youth there. And when you're playing with young guys in the transfer portal world, that's just the unfortunate side effect when you're trying to build with high school guys, the way Brent Venables is. Like, they're doing transfer, but he wants longevity through the high school ranks. Parker, you can vouch for that. Like, that's how they're trying to build the program. There was going to always be bumps in the roads, and he pretty much alluded to it. So the standard is always a standard at OU, but that doesn't mean that there's not going to be bumps in the road. He said that. And we've seen the bumps in the road. We've seen 3 losses that should not have been. Oklahoma should be playing in one of those playoff games right now. They should be, but they're not because of mistakes that they made, just like last night. That kind of sums it up. But at the same time, they won 4 more games than they did the previous season. That's something. Like, that's a big jump, no matter how you look at it. And with how they built the roster and with how they built through the depth and what they're doing in the transfer portal right now, you look at the next season, just like Parker said, just like Jesse, just like Brian, look, all 3 of you said it. Next year, they have a chance to be damn good. Like, they really do. But all that's going to depend on how well that offensive line meshes. If it meshes, everything's a go. Everything's good to go. Because if Woody Washington returns next year, you essentially have 11 starters back. Yeah, it's 9 of 11 because on the depth chart, how they're listed, whatever. But at the end of the day, R. Mason Thomas plays a crap ton of snaps and is pretty much a starter. Ethan Downs, Trace Ford, whoever you want to put on that other side of them, doesn't matter. Even if they bring in, oh my God, Caden Woolard, like somehow they get him out of Miami, Ohio. That's a 10 sack guy, right? This past season. You're essentially got 11 starters returning, all intents and purposes, that have a ton of experience and that can play. And I think when you look at that as a whole, you've got to be really excited, particularly because Brent Venables is running the defense. And if you saw the marked improvement from 22 to 23, that's got to make you a little giddy, right? Just a little bit, just a little giddy if you're an OU fan. It all points to Bill Beanbo in the offensive line. I think that's essentially what next season's going to roll into, because that defensive line with what they got coming in, and if you bring in Woolard off the edge to add to the already stellar depth that they already have, that Miguel Chavis has built at the defensive end spot. You have the 2024 class of the interior defensive lineman, Nigel Smith. You've got obviously David Stone. You've got Jaden Jackson. I mean, and they've built up. You've still got Grayson Haltom coming back. You got Dejon Terry. Like, those are names of guys that made plays for Oklahoma. Dejon Terry, Haltom. Trying to think, help me out here, Parker, of guys that are returning on the defensive line next year. Jacob Lacey. Like, these guys made plays for OU this year. They're all returning. The defense should be pretty good. Like, that's the expectation we all have, is that the defense should be good next year. Now, they've got to go on the field and do it. On paper, they should be good. On paper. On offense, they should be good as long as they can shore up that offensive guard spot and they can get the offensive line to mesh. Jackson Arnold is going to be Jackson Arnold. What you saw last night was just a precursor outside of the turnovers. You take the turnovers out of there. The good that you saw of Jackson Arnold last night is what you're going to see 95% of the time from him moving forward. And people say, how do you know that? because I saw the same crap happen in high school. The dude did the exact same thing as a freshman, then became the best sophomore, the best junior, and best senior quarterback in the country. That's not a fluke. That's not a fluke. The dude lives it. He's gonna work his butt off. Like, I've already been told that he's already got training sessions set up back home. Literally within the next few days, he's back. He's going training, and he's training the next 3 days before he heads for a quick vacation. Come back, going to train again when he gets back before he heads back to Norman. Like, the guy is ate up about it. He knows what he did. They're going to study the film. They're going to do all that stuff, like with his trainer. Like, he loves it. I don't think OU fans, you should worry about that at all. And then, like you said, Parker, Deion Burks is coming back. Andrew Anthony should be 100% by Texas next year. I mean, like, there's a lot to like from that offense if they can get that offensive line going. So for me, I think it's marked improvement and missed opportunities. And now you've got to improve on those marked improvements and fix those mixed opportunities and make them makes, if you will, moving forward in 2024, because I think they have a chance to be a 9, 10, 11 win team next year in their inaugural season in the SEC. And if that happens, if you're an OU fan, you've got to be happy. You have to be happy about that. Am I crazy? Am I wild? Am I saying things that are outlandish, guys?
No, not at all. And the schedule's tough next year. And
That's tough.
You're not going to have a cakewalk through the SEC. I think relative to what the schedule could have been, like, all things considered, it's not murderer's row, but it is not a cupcake schedule by any means.
It's not
either.
Florida. Thank God for that, right?
You've got a pretty consistently difficult road throughout the season. You're not going to be able to look past anybody. Again, I truly don't think Oklahoma is going to face anybody that they're going to be looking up at, maybe with the exception of Alabama, right? Yeah. Everybody else, I think Oklahoma should be able to roll out comparable talent. And this is where, like, year one in the SEC, this is where coaching is going to be magnified. And I think we're really going to start to get a sense of just how many of these losses the last couple of years truly fall on coaching more than the players and the execution. Because if this coaching staff does not bring their A game week in and week out in the SEC, that will be exposed, because you do not land on an SEC coaching staff, especially as a head coach these days, unless you can bring it every single week, unless you are dynamite as a recruiter and dynamite with the X's and O's. Even a guy like Eli Drinkwitz, cornball that he is, right? Like, he just won 11 games at the University of Missouri.
Oh, God, it's already on the board, bro. Like, oh, they're going to be such a, like, everybody's on the board. There's a thread on the board, Parker. You're going to love this. And I'm setting you up here, by the way, just so you know. I've been waiting on this for you to even bring up Drink in Missouri on the schedule. So on our board on OU Insider VIP, there's a member that started a thread that said, well, they won 11 games. They're going to be super tough next year. Yeah, they're going to be tough. But you're bragging about a 14-3 win when they look like dog crap versus a team that was missing literally their whole offense and was starting their third string quarterback. Like, come on, man. Like, don't go pounding your chest at that. That's nothing. You could barely move the ball on the Ohio State's defense. And you got a little bit lucky that McCord, Harrison, Julian Fleming, like, none of those dudes played. Like, their stars are not out there right now. I don't think they beat them with a full throttle Ohio State. Do y'all agree with that?
Well,
Parker, come on, man. Again, they already don't like you. You might as well feed into it.
Yeah, well, you make a good point. At this point, I might as well just lean into the hatred, because it's like Missouri. A decent contingent of the Missouri fan base, it appears, just wakes up with me on their mind every single morning. They do.
It's weird.
I don't know why that is. I'm truly not that important in the grand scheme of things.
It's your good looks. It's your good looks and the fact that you've owned them a lot. So,
but I am going to reserve judgment on the dauntingness, if you will, of any individual matchup on that schedule next year until we get an idea of what these teams do in the portal, because it has the potential to drastically reshape our perspectives on these teams.
Yep.
And so even a team like South Carolina, right, that it looks like right now Oklahoma should be able to waltz through that game and win handily. I don't know that for a fact right now. It's December 29th. Who knows? South Carolina may go make a couple splash additions in the portal that completely changes what we think of South Carolina as a football program and as a team heading into 2024. So it's too far. Like, I am very comfortable not putting any hot takes out there and just acknowledging, hey, I don't know what this schedule is going to look like a month from now. But what I do know, as I said up front, is that coaching is going to be magnified more so than it ever has before. And so I don't know how many of the critiques of Brent Venables and Jeff Lebby and DeMarco Murray and Joe John Finley et al. Are legitimate and how much weight they truly carry. But we're going to find out very quickly when the Sooners get into the throes of the SEC schedule.
Yeah, they should be overall that schedule. I think no matter how you slice it, there's even the ones like you said, Parker, the ones that look like surefire wins, they're not. It's the SEC. You never know. I've watched a winless or a one win, I can't remember, South Carolina team beat Georgia in like 2017, 2018 on a walk-off field goal. Like that just they were so bad under Muschamp, I think was the head coach at the time. And they somehow pulled it off against one of the top teams in the country and a team that went to the playoffs, right? Like, and beat Oklahoma in the semifinals that season. So like it's you never know. You never know. I mean, it's one of those, it is the one conference outside of maybe the Big Ten now that you have to play a week in and week out basis where you're going to get ran out of that stadium. You better come prepared. And I think that's what's going to make it fun for us next year. I'm excited about it. I know that Oklahoma ended on a bad note in the Alamo Bowl, but it's going to be fun, guys. Like this next year, even if Oklahoma is 8-4, 7-5 or whatever, they're not going to be, but I'm just saying, even if they were, it's just going to be fun because I think the program and I think the newness is going to make it exciting no matter what. No matter what.
Oh, I'm stoked. I absolutely cannot wait for next season. I just, because of everything Parker just said, I don't, especially right now, but even once we know everything, once SEC Media Days come around in July, you could tell me a million things happen and I would believe it. You could tell me OU contends, it wins the SEC. You could tell me they struggle and win 7 games. I don't know, but to be able to try, I mean, from a purely reporter job standpoint, to be able to go to these places and these new environments and see actually what the SEC is all about on a week in, week out basis and watch it. That part's selfishly is exciting, but from a college football fan aspect, OU and Texas joining the SEC, the fact that it's almost here and that I don't know how anybody could say definitively either way what's going to happen. Next year is going to be awesome. And I think the Alamo Bowl for OU, it's a sour way to end the season. And I think both things, as Parker said, both things can be true. That it's not wildly, it doesn't have a big impact on this season, and it shouldn't have a big impact on the outlook during the offseason. But at the same time, there is stuff that they can learn. Absolutely. What?
I want to ask you. I want to answer here for this because I think this is an interesting question. Oklahoma wins that game last night. Yeah, that's good. That's great. It's a great positive to have 11 wins, 5 more than you did the previous season. Momentum, right? There's momentum. But on the flip side, there can also be complacency because now you feel like you're back, you're Oklahoma. You don't have to work as hard in the off season because you're there, you know. I'm of the impression that the loss actually fuels a little bit more fire for them this offseason to prove people a little bit more. You know, just kind of, yeah. You can sit there and shake your head, Parker, but I've been in a locker room enough to
Sure.
know that stuff galvanizes guys. Like that crap's not happening again. We're not going to lose like that again. And they use that, and the coaches finagle some phrase that they use for all off season, and they throw that crap. They throw the Kansas game, the Oklahoma State game, and the Arizona game in their face all off season. This is what's going to happen if you don't do this. And I honestly, I think it may have been a plus in that aspect because with the youth, and yeah, you have really good leaders in Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman, but the offense is lacking. They're lacking in leaders. That's where I think it helps them a little bit. The struggle.
And here's what I would say though, Brent. Like any other year, I would agree with you. I think the difference is you're going to the SEC.
The SEC.
And so, like, I truly believe that regardless of what the outcome would have been last night, this team would have approached the 2024 season and will approach the 2024 season with the exact same mindset, which is we have proven nothing. We are starting from scratch. We are the new kid on the block. We are in completely unfamiliar territory, walking into a war zone that we have never experienced before, and we're going to have to be ready for battle every single week. And I will say, I do think the loss fuels the fire a little bit more on an individual level for a guy like Jackson Arnold, right? Because you turn the ball over 4 times in your first career start. I think it sets up great for him because he doesn't have to go play another game next week, right? There's 8 months between now and the next time he has to step on the football field in a competitive capacity. And so I might be a little bit squeamish if he had to go play again next week. I'd maybe start to worry that he begins to see ghosts and loses that swagger and that confidence that he carries. But because he's going to have 8 months to be able to correct all of the very fixable mistakes that he made in that Alamo Bowl, I think he'll be much better off for it. And I think when he steps on that field again on August 31st, you're going to see a different dude. And in large part, I think that will be due to the fact that the Alamo Bowl left a sour taste in his mouth, and he doesn't want that to linger any longer than necessary. So on an individual level, I think I agree with you. As far as the team is concerned, though, because of the pending move to the SEC, I believe, and that's part of the reason I said from the get-go, right? I truly don't think the outcome of this game changes much. It's because any way you slice it, Oklahoma is the new blood in the SEC next year, and they've got a target on their back every single week because every single member of that conference wants to prove to them that this is a different ballgame than what you're used to, and you're going to learn the hard way.
Yeah,
they're going to have a big target. Go ahead, Brian. Brian.
Yeah. I'm excited to see, from the fan base's perspective. I don't remember who said this, and I wish I did, but somebody along the way, and Brandon, it may have been you. Anyways, somewhere along the way over the last half decade, it feels as if the environment at Oklahoma home games has sort of lacked a bit, because your big home games are West Virginia, and no offense to the Mountaineers or TCU, it's a little different though when you have Alabama coming to town or you have Tennessee coming to town. I'm excited to see those things, but I'm also excited for Oklahoma fans to travel to Oxford, to travel to Auburn, to see what this means when they say it just means more, figuring out that for those people it does mean something different. There is something different. So
it just means more, Paul.
Yeah. it's really it's an interesting dynamic, because if you think back to when everybody found out that Oklahoma and Texas were going to the SEC in 2021, prior to the 2021 season, Oklahoma fans were like, "Oh, we're about to run in there and run this thing. Like all the confidence in the world, very confident about things. And then everything that's transpired, now there's trepidation. You're scared. You almost have half of the fan base. It's like, what are we doing? We're about to walk into this place and be, but what it comes down to, Brandon, you said a second ago, 10 losses over the last 2 years for Brent Venables. While you were talking, stats and info guy over here, 20 turnovers in those 10 games, 12 turnovers
12.
in their 3 losses this year.
Yep.
So what it really comes down to, I think Oklahoma really just has been in the business of shooting themselves in the foot. And as much as that's happened over the last couple of years, I do think it goes into your point. If there's anything to drive home, you can't not look 6 turnovers in the face like that. You can't. It's such a big number. It'll be like West Virginia using 14 all year long, being picked 14th and they go and finish 9-4. 6 is going to be a number you have to take care of the football. Like it's something that I do think there's a positive to that, where they have to put themselves in position to win football games rather than putting themselves in position to lose football games. And that's what they've done in those 10 games over the last couple of years. So I agree. And as Parker said, outside of that Alabama game, I don't think there's anybody on the schedule that Oklahoma is going to be, overly matched when it comes to talent on the field. So just putting yourself in the right position and learning it's a perfect example.
And when you're not overmatched in the talent department, all it boils down to is execution.
Yep.
Who's going to execute better?
Penalties.
That's what decides a football game.
Penalties.
Stop committing penalties. Oh my gosh, it was so frustrating to watch this year. Oh my God, fix that. They led the
every
Big
time
12
they get to the 50.
They led the Big 12 in penalties this year and then committed 7 more. And some of those are against Arizona, and some of those, oh my goodness, were costly. Got to fix it. To Parker's point, that's just most of that's just execution on the field.
Yeah.
Got to be better. So I don't know why I got so heated about that all of a sudden. I don't know why.
Because it's warranted, man. Every time they hit the 50-yard line, there was something bound to happen. Every time.
Gotta fix
Plus side. Let's go back to the other side, guys. You're not ready to be over here just yet. It's just, anyways. I think that we've covered everything, right? Like I think we've covered the gambit of that game last night. We've covered the future. I think we can stop right there. So if you're not an OU Insider member, go join. Lots is going to happen over the next few weeks, and they got a junior day. Literally a month from today, that's going to be massive. It's already got, from stuff that we've heard, it's got the who's who of 2025 class coming in and some of the who's who of 2026 coming in. Yes, that's right. 25 and 26 classes are here, and they're here to stay for the next few years. So that will be the talking points on the recruiting trail. Transfer portal stuff's heating up to see where Oklahoma is going to go as far as offensive guard, defensive end, defensive line. See if they can shore those things up a little bit moving in while they move into the SEC. We're going to have that covered for you. We got the basketball program covered for you. OU is now 11-1 in basketball. Hottest start that they've had in since 2016, I believe. So, I mean, Jesse would know. Him and Brody covered that better than anybody. And then we're going to have softball, baseball, all that. Like Parker, you talked about it on the instant reaction last night. It's kind of, if you love OU athletics, OU Insider is where you want to be, because there's always something going on, always something coverage, always talking points. Fans are always talking about there's thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands. I say that all the time, but there's so many fans on there talking. That board is just crazy all the time, and we love it. It's busy. If you love OU athletics, if you love OU football, if you love OU recruiting, if you love the transfer portal stuff, and you want to be up to date and you want to be on the inside of that, and when I say that they may not be done with just the positions that I name, offensive guard, defensive end, defensive line, there's another position that they might be shoring up on the other side of the New Year's. So we'll have that covered for you there too on OU Insider. Little hint. Yeah. So go join us. And if you're not subscribed to this YouTube channel, subscribe, because podcast, basketball, football, recruiting, softball, all of our stuff that we cover, it's going to be right here. We're going to have some really awesome special guests this off season. Going to try to get some really big names to come on here and join Parker and I, join Brian and Jesse on their podcasts. And we're going to try to make sure you guys are entertained throughout the whole off season. And that's going to make, and they're going to have a lot of basketball talk too, by the way, tons of basketball talk, tons of basketball. In the Paint is what it's called. So when you see that, make sure you subscribe to that on any podcast platform, and make sure you're subscribed right here on the OU Insider YouTube channel. All right, that's going to do it for the 2023 version of the OU Insider Under the Visor Sooners postgame podcast. For Parker Thune, for Brian Clinton, for Jesse Crittenden, my name is Brandon Drum. You guys have a blessed day, and we will see you guys in 2024.